I'm gonna
fun.
pull it up on Facebook.
Well, I'm not gonna do it on Facebook Live. I'm just videoing it. So,
Okay.
is am I roughly in frame, or is it over my head?
Oh, you're definitely in frame, but you're like this side.
Okay. Don't get me.
So-
Don't get my. Trying to get me from the gut side if you can.
on camera, right?
No, you gain 10 pounds. The camera adds 10 pounds. I
There
think
you
is
go.
what they say.
Now
So-
you're centered,
Anyway,
almost centered right
that's-
there.
That's good. Thank you. Tom Paul is helping me get the camera set up. We're going to be videotaping this tonight as well. I know last week you had me on videotape. That's why I'm so far over here because, well, originally I was going to have the camera plugged in, but I don't know if I'm going to have to or not. But actually, I probably should. Dang it. Now that we got it all set up, let's see if we can do this without ruining it too much. Oh, I have to move it a little bit.
Those things back in the frame.
Yeah, I'll do that.
And I'll go ahead and get you.
I need to cut in like a now pause for technical difficulties. And then-
Well, you've
Come
already
back.
had it recording, you might as well start it again.
oh no, they're getting all the content. They're getting all the content. We're not cutting anything out.
You don't want to have this.
We'll do it live. You know, no, we're not. No, I don't want it to be. I don't want it to be staged. This is real. That's how it goes. So before we get started tonight, we'll do as we normally do. We'll start with our best and worst. What was the best and worst of your week? I guess for me, you can do the last 2 weeks since I wasn't here with you last week. I was speaking at a youth camp last week, and Wednesday was the first night. I actually spoke Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday night, and then went to bed Saturday night and got up and went to church on Sunday. So it was a good week, but it was busy. You know, I'm used to prepping for Bible study on Wednesdays, and I'm used to prepping for sermons on Sundays, and I'm used to kind of doing that every week. I'm not used to doing that and then adding 4 other sermons into the mix. So it was a lot of brain energy exhausted last week, but it was good. The camp went well, and I think the people that invited me were happy, and the kids seemed like they got a lot out of it. So I'm grateful for that. That was probably my best. My worst is just that it seems like sometimes it feels like you ask God for opportunities, and then sometimes I feel like the enemy's like, okay, well, if he's going to get opportunities, give it to him all at once, all at the same time. And so that's kind of the way it's been for the last couple of weeks. But so far, all the plates have been spinning. So we're going to try to keep that going. But anybody else, at best and worst, and speak loudly so that Henry and Victoria and we're going to post it on YouTube so they can watch it. So anybody else might hear you. So
Said we hired a new employee, this is her second week,
okay.
but the worst is that it's taking a lot more training than.
Yeah, I need a lot more hand holding than you're used to.
Than what I thought was.
Well, it is one of those things where you're like, I could do this faster if I just did it myself, but then they're never going to learn. So you got to take the time. Hopefully, this person will stay long enough. That's the other thing that seems to be happening a lot in this job market is employers are complaining a lot right now that by the time they get somebody onboarded and get them trained, that they either quit or they leave for something else. By the time you kind of get them, as soon as they get into what they know what they're doing, they're gone and out the door. So hopefully that won't happen for you guys. So anybody else? Go ahead, Mandy.
Past 2 weeks at work has been great. We got a lot of new people.
That's good.
I thought I was losing my hours, but my boss made sure that her main crew got their 40 out of it. And I just found out last week that my training for the second position of supervisor starts to pick up next month. So,
Cool.
yay.
That's awesome.
And tomorrow's actually my 1-year anniversary with Hilton. It feels like it's been a century, but I'm enjoying it just the same. The only negative thing I can say is that too many coworkers are suffering from COVID as well. That's why I've been working the bar the past couple nights in the hotel. I hope they get better soon and come back to work because it feels weird without them being around.
COVID is back on the rise in Houston County.
To try and
That's
bring back the
why.
mask mandate as well.
That's why Henry and Victoria aren't here. I haven't heard anything about any indications that the mask mandate is going to come back around in Houston County. I will tell you, interestingly enough, that I've started getting daily reports from the hospital again. They used to email us every day, all the elected officials, and tell us what the COVID numbers were, and they stopped doing that because the numbers basically got to zero there for a while. and they've started doing it again. But I remember today, I thought it was interesting. The number of people hospitalized for COVID in Houston County is 19, and 11 of them were vaccinated, and 8 of them weren't. And I thought it was interesting. It's almost like not quite 50-50, but close. Vaccinated and unvaccinated. People that are sick enough to be in the hospital. They had nobody in the ICU and nobody on a ventilator. So it seems like it is this same kind of thing where it is a, comparatively speaking, it is a milder version. But I'm sure when you're homesick with it, it doesn't feel mild at all. But we just need to. It seems as though this is going to be another version of the flu. We had the common cold, and then you had the influenza outbreak in 1912, and then now flu is just something that happens every year. You don't think about it, but it was the same kind of deal.
Either.
So yeah, the weather changes, the hot weather, and then the rain, and then I think we're gonna have another pollen bloom here usually at the end of the summer when it gets around to August, which makes everybody feel sick again too. So, but we're working our way through it. Anybody else? Best and worst?
My best is
This
that
is what are we gonna call you? They can't see you. This is.
I'm Crowder, Miss Mandy.
We're gonna go with Mandy 1 and Mandy A. Is what we'll go with. That won't help them at all. But continue. Go ahead.
Anyways,
Gluten-free.
gluten-free Mandy, yes.
Gluten-free Mandy. Go ahead. Yeah. It's good to be known for something, I guess.
Anyways, my best is that I have gotten so much training in x-rays recently that I'm so fast that today Tara had to come into the x-ray room and say, I need you to slow down because we don't have room for patients. But my worst is that the reason why is because I've had to speed up in order for us to not get behind because we've been down a hygienist and down a hygiene assistant all week long.
Are they out sick?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
one's on jury duty. The hygiene assistant who's new, the one that we've had issues with. But it was like last minute. She told us. She told us last minute.
Usually you get that notice like 2 weeks out, don't you?
Exactly. She told us like
Usually.
last
I got mine a
week.
month out.
Anyway.
A month out? You can call the court and check. As an employer, you can call and ask if somebody's actually there.
Well, they normally give you an excuse.
Yeah, they'll give you a
Or you get a copy, or you give a copy of the notice.
yeah, they'll give you a little notice for work that says I was in fact at jury duty.
Well,
So.
Monday she wasn't there, and our manager asked Tara, the girl who trained me, who's the unofficial manager of the hygiene assistants. Anyways, and she asked her where Kyle was, this new girl. She asked her, like she didn't already know.
Hmm.
Yeah, so that's why it was odd.
Well, that is interesting. The old jury duty. And the old jury duty. My grandma died at jury duty, so I have to go. I can't be at work today. It's a new, whole new version of that excuse. Let's jump into what is going to be the last session for this book, David the Great, that we have been going through. I hope that everybody has enjoyed it. I've enjoyed teaching it. But I would say I particularly like Dr. Rutland's writing and his style. I will say a lot of his other books, if you read any of his other stuff, are much more academic than this. You'll note that he says in the beginning, this is a book that came out of a series of lectures. So it's written much more colloquially probably than any other thing that he's ever done. But we're at the tail end of David's life, and we're going to read this passage that this chapter is based on, and it's 1 Kings chapter 2. So if you've got a Bible or you want to download it up on your app or whatever, you can do that. I'm going to do that right now. Bible Gateway is the one that I use. You can use whatever you like. Should have had this pulled up, but we'll give everybody else a second to get theirs pulled up, right? 1 Kings chapter 2. The title of this last chapter, we're going to do chapter 17 and the epilogue today, is A Dangerous Dying Lion is the name of this chapter. And so read this with me if you like. It's not a very long chapter. 1 Kings chapter 2. When the time drew near for David to die, he gave a charge to Solomon his son. I am about to go the way of all the earth, he said. Be strong, act like a man, and observe what the Lord your God requires. Walk in obedience to him and keep his decrees and commands, his laws and regulations as written in the law of Moses. Do this so that you may prosper in all that you do and wherever you go, and that the Lord may keep his promise to me if your descendants watch how they live, and if they walk faithfully before me with all their heart and soul. you will never fail to have a successor on the throne of Israel. Now you yourself know what Joab, son of Zeruiah, did to me, what he did to the two commanders of Israel's armies, Abner, son of Ner, and Amasa, son of Jether. He killed them, shedding their blood in peacetime as if in battle. And with that blood he stained the belt around his waist and the sandals on his feet. Deal with him according to your wisdom, but do not let his gray head go down to the grave in peace. But show kindness to the sons of Barzillai of Gilead, and let them be among those who eat at your table. They stood by me when I fled from your brother Absalom. And remember, you have with you Shimei, son of Gera, the Benjamite from Bahurim, who called down bitter curses on me the day I went to Mahanaim. This is when he was fleeing from Absalom. There was just a guy who, when David asked for help, he kind of cussed him out and threw rocks at him instead of helping him. And David has not forgotten, as you can see. I swore to him by the Lord, I will not put you to death by the sword. But now, do not consider him innocent. You are a man of wisdom, and you will know what to do. Bring his gray head down to the grave in blood. Then David rested with his ancestors, which is Old Testament, for he died, and was buried in the city of David. He had reigned 40 years over Israel, 7 in Hebron, and 33 in Jerusalem. So Solomon sat on the throne of his father David, and his rule was firmly established. Now Adonijah, the son of Haggith, went to Bathsheba, Solomon's mother, and Bathsheba asked him, do you come peacefully? Now if you remember, I know some of these names can be confusing, so let's make sure we know what we're talking about. Adonijah was one of David's sons, one of his arguably more legitimate sons than Solomon, and he declared himself king while King David was dying. And remember, this was from I believe this was last week where we sent where David said, hey, if you're going to be the king, we got to take care of this. And they sort of forced Solomon over to the throne. And this guy went and fled and clung to the horns of the altar. And Solomon said, well, you can live as long as there's no shenanigans, right? As long as there's no ill will with you, as long as you behave yourself, basically, I will leave you alone. So he goes now to Solomon's mother, and that's why she says, do you come peacefully? Because, as Dr. Rutland's going to point out here in a minute, if he had been successful in his path to become king, he almost certainly would have killed Solomon and his mother, because they had a claim to the throne, right? Do you come peacefully? He answered, yes, peacefully. Then he added, I have something to say to you. You may say it, she replied. As you know, he said, the kingdom was mine. All Israel looked to me as their king. But things change, and the kingdom has gone to my brother, for it has come to him from the Lord. Now I have one request to make of you. Do not refuse me. You may make it, she said. So he continued, please ask King Solomon, he will not refuse you, to give me Abishag the Shunammite as my wife. Does anybody remember who Abishag the Shunammite was? We talked about her last week.
The warmer.
Yeah, she was the bed warmer, the young girl that they had come in order to keep the elderly and sick King David from being too cold while he was in bed. So he has now asked for her hand in marriage. Very well, Bathsheba replied, I will speak to the king for you. When Bathsheba went to King Solomon to speak to him for Adonijah, the king stood up to meet her, bowed down to her, and sat down on his throne. He had a throne brought for the king's mother, and she sat down at his right hand. I have one small request to make of you, she said. Do not refuse me. The king replied, make it, my mother, I will not refuse you. So she said, let Abishag the Shunammite be given in marriage to your brother Adonijah. King Solomon answered his mother, why do you request Abishag the Shunammite for Adonijah? You might as well request the kingdom for him. After all, he is my older brother. Yes, for him and for Abiathar the priest and Joab the son of Zeruiah. Then King Solomon swore by the Lord, may God deal with me, be it ever so severely, if Adonijah does not pay with his life for this request. And now as surely as the Lord lives, he who has established me securely on the throne of my father David has founded a dynasty for me as he promised. Adonijah shall be put to death today. So King Solomon gave orders to Benaiah son of Jehoiada, and he struck down Adonijah, and he died. To Abiathar the priest, the king said, go back to your fields in Enoth. You deserve to die, but I will not put you to death now, because you carried the ark of the sovereign Lord before my father David and shared all my father's hardships. Anybody remember who this guy is? This was King David's priest who sided with Adonijah last week when he was declaring himself king. So Solomon removed Abiathar from the priesthood of the Lord, fulfilling the word of the Lord he had spoken at Shiloh about the house of Eli. You remember, now this is probably 3 or 4 months ago now, but we did a sermon series on Sundays about the life of Samuel. And Eli was the priest who was in charge of the temple at Shiloh, where Samuel's mother took him and left him with the Lord. And it was his sons who ran out and cost them the Ark of the Covenant. They lost it in battle. It was lost for almost 100 years, right? And this guy is a descendant of Eli. He's the last one. And now Solomon has removed him from the priesthood. So the Bible here is just making clear, hey, this is something God said he was going to do, and he's done it. It has taken a lot more time maybe than we would have expected or thought was going to happen, but God's will must be done, right? Verse 28, when the news reached Joab, who had conspired with Adonijah, though not with Absalom, he fled to the tent of the Lord and took hold of the horns of the altar. King Solomon was told that Joab had fled to the tent of the Lord and was beside the altar. Then Solomon ordered Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, go strike him down. So you remember from last week, going in and holding on to the horns of the altar was a way to say, no, I'm innocent. I didn't do this. It was sort of a way to make a last-minute appeal. Many times, rulers in particular were hesitant to slay anybody on the altar of the Lord, because that was the place where sacrifices were made. It was the place where they worshipped. It would be like killing somebody in the sanctuary, right? This was a holy place. And so Joab says, no, I'm not leaving. Verse 30, it says, so Benaiah entered the tent of the Lord and said to Joab, the king says, come out. But he answered, no, I will die here. And Benaiah reported to the king, this is how Joab answered me. Then the king commanded Benaiah, do as he says. Strike him down and bury him. Another translation says, do as Joab wishes. Or basically give him what he wants. If he wants to die right there, he can die right there. Strike him down and bury him, and so clear me and my whole family of the guilt of the innocent blood that Joab shed. The Lord will repay him for the blood he shed, because without my father David knowing it, he attacked 2 men and killed them with the sword. Both of them, Abner, son of Ner, who you will remember he led out of the city of refuge like they were going to be buddies and stabbed him in the gut, commander of Israel's army, and Amasa, son of Jether, commander of Judah's army. This is the guy who took too long to come back with the army like he was supposed to, and Joab got him like a fish in front of everybody and scared the rest of the army to death, and they got back behind King David. They were better men and more upright than he. May the guilt of their blood rest on the head of Joab and his descendants forever. But on David and his descendants, his house and his throne, may there be the Lord's peace forever. So Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, went up and struck down Joab and killed him, and he was buried at his home out in the country. The king put Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, over the army in Joab's position, and replaced Abiathar with Zadok the priest. You remember from last week, these are the 2 men that King David sent to carry out this plan to have Solomon anointed king of all Israel. Then the king sent for Shimei and said to him, build your house in Jerusalem and live there, but do not go anywhere else. This is the guy we talked about a minute ago who was mocking David and throwing rocks at him when he asked for help as he fled for Absalom. David told Solomon, hey, you need to kill this guy. Don't let his gray head go down to the grave in peace, is what David said. But Solomon doesn't do that. He basically puts him under house arrest. Verse 37, he says, build your house in Jerusalem and live there, but do not go anywhere else. The day you leave and cross the Kidron Valley, you can be sure you will die, and your blood will be on your own head. Shimei answered the king, what you say is good. Your servant will do as my lord the king has said. And Shimei stayed in Jerusalem for a long time. But 3 years later, 2 of Shimei's slaves ran off to Achish, son of Maacah, king of Gath. And Shimei told, your slaves are in Gath. And at this he saddled his donkey and went after them. So in verse 41, it says, when Solomon was told that Shimei had gone from Jerusalem to Gath and had returned, the king summoned him and said, did I not make you swear by the Lord and warn you on the day you leave to go anywhere else? You can be sure you will die. At that time you said to me, what you say is good, I will obey. Why then did you not keep your oath to the Lord and obey the command I gave you? And the king also said to Shimei, you know in your heart all the wrong you did to my father David, and now the Lord will repay you for your wrongdoing. But King Solomon will be blessed, and David's throne will remain secure in the Lord forever. Then the king gave the order to Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, and he went out and struck him down, and he died. and the kingdom was now established in Solomon's hands. So we have a very sort of Game of Thrones ending to David's life here, where just a lot of people get whacked. In fact, Dr. Rutland even here compares him to Don Corleone at the end of The Godfather, when he pulls Michael in and says, "Hey, here's the people that you got to wipe, that you got to take out, or they're going to try to take power from you." He says here, I'm on page 202 of our book, and he says, David deserved all the honors heaped on him in his long, full life. He truly was a master of multiple trades: shepherd, musician, poet, giant slayer, warrior, mercenary, military strategist, politician, spiritual leader, king. He makes a point here to say that David had really ever only focused on two things. Since the moment that Samuel goes into David's house and says, "No, none of these sons of yours are the right person. Do you have any other sons?" From that moment on, David really only ever focused on two things, and those were serving God and serving Israel. Those were the two guiding principles of David's life for the rest of his days. And we're going to see some of that play out in the decisions that he makes here, because you can read that chapter and go, wow, this is pretty harsh. This is pretty brutal. You almost kind of petty, some of the things. Because so a guy insulted you, a guy threw rocks at you, it didn't help you. You're still the king, right? But we're going to play that out just a little bit. He writes here, now as he lay dying, he knew that there were enemies, ruthless, powerful enemies that Solomon had to deal with, and it fell to David to give the orders. David tells Solomon, in no uncertain terms, who must be dealt with. He really does kind of tell him, these are all the people that need to disappear if your kingdom is going to be established. And so let's take a minute and talk about each one of these as we go through. We're going to do them a little out of order, but the first one is Joab. King David says of Joab to Solomon, he says, do what you think is best, but don't let him grow old and go to his grave in peace. I like the way the NIV says it. Don't let his gray head go down to the grave in peace. He's saying, don't let him live a long life and die peacefully at home. He's earned maybe a different end. On page 203, I like the way this is written. It says, since David's earliest days with his Gibberim, those were his mighty men, his bodyguard that fought with him, who had been his bloodiest soldier? Certainly it was Joab. He had killed ruthlessly and without remorse, not only in battle, but in murderous feuds, sometimes at David's command, such as with Uriah the Hittite. Other times he acted despite his king's command, as he did with Abner and Absalom and Amasa. And now it was Joab's turn in the circle of life to be the one who died by the sword. Is it strange to you? And he asked this question, I want to see your thoughts on it. Is it strange that David tells Solomon to kill Joab? Not only has he been one of his closest advisors, he's also, by blood, he's David's nephew. Is it strange that it almost sort of seems too worldly, doesn't it?
I wonder almost if he thought, well, I can handle him, but I'm not going to be here, and I know what he's like. I know what he's done. He's done a lot for me, but he's also he's done things that I didn't want him to do, and I don't want Solomon to have to deal with that.
He showed many times that he'll...
have an equal playing field.
That's a good point. He's shown many times that he'll do his own thing if he thinks it's what's best.
Right.
And if he would dare to do that to David, he will certainly...
Right.
Particularly after he already tried to put somebody else on the throne, by the way. You remember just last week we were talking about how he tried to appoint somebody else king. He says here, Joab made it clear that he was a dire threat to Solomon's kingdom. David knew that if at any point during Solomon's reign another opportunity presented itself for Joab to help someone else take the throne away by mutiny,
He was the weakest link.
the general would do so in the blink of an eye. And so Joab had to go. And so, I'll put it to you again. Why did David, and if you boil it down to the most bedrock level, why did David tell Solomon to kill Joab?
Protect the throne. And Israel.
Yeah.
And Jerusalem.
Yeah. Because he was serving these two things the whole time, right? It's God in Israel, right? And so in any other time, David, who has sort of always been an apologist for the people that he cared about, right? Like even when Joab murdered those guys, right? Like when he takes the guy and puts his arm around him and sort of walks him outside the boundary where he couldn't legally kill him, and then he just kills him anyway, and like that was murder. There's no way to say it. He planned to do that. That was not an accident. Same thing with Absalom. Even though the king had said, "He don't hurt my son, bring him back to me," he did what he thought was best, and he killed him anyway. Same thing with the guy who was late with the army, right? He said the king should have made this point, so I'm going to make it for him, and he kills this guy. And so we have no reason to believe that the king that he would have tried to do what he thought was best. You know, it seems like Joab's ethics are a little situational, right? Yes, sir.
I think Joab held the secret of David. He received the instructions to put Uriah. Maybe at that time he didn't know what the reason for, but I mean, once he gets back in Jerusalem, you can easily
Figures it out.
Yeah, that's true. Maybe he had some dirt, you know.
Yeah,
and he,
so I think that might have allowed him to disrespect David.
yeah.
And David could not handle him because, I mean, he had something on him. So he could never handle Joab.
Yeah, well, and I had to go back and read it. I think David might have publicly sort of confessed everything before the people. I don't remember.
Didn't he
But
technically do that when he wrote a song, I think, about it?
yeah, but it's not explicit. I don't know, and I don't know how widely those were. He did, but I don't know how widely those were published in his day. Like they existed. I don't know that everybody in the nation would have necessarily seen them. But you're right. We got to remember, not every exploit in David's life is recorded in Scripture. It's fair to say Joab might have known where some other. We always use the phrase he knows where some bodies were buried. They might literally have been bodies that he knew where they were buried. That's absolutely a good point. He says here, surely Joab assumed the tender young King Solomon would lack the nerve to kill anyone, especially a relative, on the horns of the altar. I mean, Joab and the king are cousins, right? And without hesitation, Solomon replies, "Do as Joab said. You kill him right there on the altar." Long ago, he had to lure the pardoned Abner out of refuge in order to kill him. And he believes I feel the same constraint. I don't. Gut him where he is. That's the more relevant interpretation of that passage. But I would tell you that I think this is one that it points back to this, right? That even for Solomon, this is the same thing. I think, is he probably irritated with Joab that he backed the wrong horse, so to speak? Is he distrustful of him? Sure. But if all of those things were true, if he was just going to kill him out of spite, why wait until now, right? Why not just take him out immediately? Because remember, David was still alive, but he abdicated. He made Solomon the king. Solomon has been the king while David was still alive. So he could have just whacked Joab when he wanted to. He waited. But now we're at a point where in order to best serve God and to best serve Israel, this guy has to be taken off the board. Some of you, well, all of you in one way or another are in positions of leadership, whether you like it or not, whether it is just in leadership over yourself, or whether it's in leadership over your family, or whether it's in a leadership position at this church or at work or whatever. And this is something that if you stay in leadership long enough, this is something that you will have to face. And really, maybe it's not as finite as God and Israel. Maybe it's in order to do what's right and in order to do what is best for the organization. I can tell you that one of the things I've enjoyed the least being on city council is having to be involved in firing a couple people. The people that I personally liked. Like personally, I liked you. The two that I'm thinking of in particular were police officers. And I liked them personally. I'd gotten to know them a little bit. But one of them had done something that exposed us to incredible risk. He exposed the city to something that was what I would say it would be risk for litigation. We actually wound up settling it with this person, just paying them some cash. But and then the other one was an issue where this was a person who I liked, actually a person who I'd gone to the shooting range and gone shooting with and spent some time with. But one of a number of things that came to light was that he had set up a business where he bought and sold firearms and then was kind of running all the city's business through his business. And you can't do that. That's against the law. We have procurement procedures and things like that. And so, we never really found the concrete evidence that had happened. But while we were trying to investigate all that, he just resigned and left. So it's a lot. Basically, it was that's what it was coming down to. And it's not something that I enjoyed. I was not like thrilled. I did not feel like Columbo solving the case. It was just like every time you found something else, you're like, oh no, here's more. Here's another log on the fire that you're not happy about it, but it was what was best for, in terms of, it was what was ethical, and it was what was best for the organization, right? It's sort of the same question. So let's look at this other guy. And I'm not sure that I'm saying his name correctly. I should have looked it up today, but Shimei, this guy who was sort of just mean to King David as he fled from Absalom. And he says this here on page 205. After King David has told him, I want you to kill this guy that was mean to me. I want you to kill this guy who threw rocks at us, right? He says, this is shocking to us. Such an old wound, such a petty insult remembered all those years. Is it enough to deserve death? So I think Dr. Rutland gives a pretty good answer here, but I'd like to hear from you. Is just somebody insulting him, throwing rocks at him, like literally throwing rocks at him, is it enough to merit him being executed by the state? That's what happened here. You don't think so? It's a little harsh. One vote for harsh.
It's a little harsh.
I think he deserved it because he violated the condition of his parole, sort of. Remember?
Yeah, well, no, he
Solomon
did.
said-
Yeah,
Solomon said,
Yeah.
you should leave it. Once you
Solomon
leave-
is even.
Solomon was wise. He was like, I wanted to be on his hands. The
He
blood
was
is
even more
Solomon.
merciful than David, right? David said, just go kill him, right? And Solomon gives him a chance. He basically puts him under house arrest.
Right.
But he lets him build his own house. He lets him build it in the city. It wasn't like he was off in some desolate area. Yeah, he gave him enough rope to hang himself, certainly. He couldn't behave. He makes it, again, I think the point is well made here. David and Solomon were kings in the early Iron Age. Kings who were desperately trying to hold together a newborn kingdom by their fingernails. Previously, 2 civil wars had been fought. A coup d'etat was barely foiled when Solomon was hurriedly appointed as David's successor. So we've had 2 attempts at civil war, and we've had 1 attempt at a coup. In pretty recent history, the last 5 or 10 years here, it's not like this is old news.
It kind of goes back to what you said, we can't judge what they did.
Sure.
Based on what was that time in our.
Yeah,
view of
you
the
definitely
time.
can't, again, you can't view the Iron Age through 21st
freedom of
century.
speech.
Yeah, through 21st century lenses, that's for sure. But he actually gives some specifics here. His reasons for commanding a, quote, bloody death for a curmudgeon are twofold. One, Solomon had to make it clear what will happen to instigators of internal uprising and rebellions against the king. He was sort of in support of Absalom when he was doing this. He was in support of rebellion. And so the King David is telling the new King Solomon it's important to send a message. Hey, that is not going to be something that we're going to put up with. You're not going to...
There's no telling how much money has been spent on the people looking on the FBI, looking for all these people that
Oh, sure.
were in January
6th, yep.
insurgents and,
Sure.
and our capital. They're still being
They're still, well, everybody's going to remember your birthday for the rest of time. Better is it just as good to be infamous as it is to be famous? Close enough. And the other point here is that there is something to be said for the office at this point. The office of king, and he says 2 different public humiliations against the king can't go unanswered forever. 1, you throw insults at the king, and then 2, you ignore the king's generous offer to let you just live your life in peace and stay in the city. And he had to deal with it. He had to address it. And I like the way he rewords it. Here on page 206, he says, "Didn't I tell you never to leave or to cross the Kidron Valley?" Well, yeah, but I came right back. But that's exactly. I came right back. I had to go get my slaves were gone. I had to do a thing. I had to handle it. I didn't think you meant I literally couldn't ever cross the Kidron. I just needed to retrieve my escaped slaves, and then I came right back. No, I meant literally. A king means exactly what he says. I tried to save your pathetic life. Then the king turns to Benaniah, who he had appointed to Joab's old position, and says, kill him. Who is Solomon starting to remind you of at this point? Yeah, we've seen similar scenes play out in David's life several times.
Son.
Right? Yeah,
Or
I tried to not put you in this position, but you know what? You dug your own grave here. Hey, kill this idiot, right? We saw David do that several times throughout his history. So now we have this strange scene with Adonijah, which was weird. This is weird, right? This is weird. And I think that I think we figure out why he does it. Now, so he goes to Solomon's mother, and he says, "Hey, I come in peace."
I don't know why she did.
Well,
Maybe to keep the people.
I think at least Dr. Rutland has a theory that I think is good, but he does make a point to say, and I think it's right. There's no doubt that if he would have become the king, he would have killed her and Solomon. Like there's no doubt. I mean, Solomon's going to kill him here in a minute, right? Like that is sort of the way this went in the Iron Age, because people would, when you play the Game of Thrones, you either win or you die, right? I'm the only one who's seen that. It's okay, it's fine. That's the big quote from the book. That's the big quote from it. But well, I mean, this is pretty this is pretty violent. But that's true. You're just reading it. I guess it's not the same. So he comes to her and he says, "Listen, God had his way. God has created the king that he wanted to have. I'm fine with it, but I've fallen in love. I love this girl, and I just want to marry her. And would you help?" And
But that's what his scenario is. It doesn't say that in scripture.
yeah, it does not say that explicitly, but I mean, he's asking for her hand in marriage, and she's a comparatively low-ranked person. She's not from a family of great wealth or anything like that. We're not led to believe she was somebody who was in the right place at the right time with the right qualifications to be able to lay in the bed with the king, right? And he says, this is his theory anyway. He says, "Poor Bathsheba, ever the romantic, was she not? While married to Uriah the Hittite, the king came calling, and she was swept off her feet by his power, his royalty, and his romance. Because of romance, she had suffered misery and shame. Forever the woman everyone pointed at behind her back. Years later, she still has not changed. The man who tried stealing the throne, a man whom she admitted with her own words would have had her killed as his first act as king, comes to her on behalf of, quote, love, and her heart melts. I will go to my son on your behalf and ask him to let you marry the love of your life." So again, this is Dr. Rutland's theory as to why she would be willing to do this. Because honestly,
I think there would have to be a reason, because I don't know why you would.
exactly, why would you help this guy? He's done nothing but try to cause you harm. And Solomon, again, you said Solomon is well known for his wisdom. We haven't had that moment in Solomon's life yet where he asked the Lord for more wisdom, but he says, basically, the problem is to let somebody who has been as disrespectful to King Solomon as he could be marry someone who had shared a bed with his father. Even though she was a virgin, we're very clear that the point was they were not supposed to have relations of any kind. It was just physically to keep him warm. This is still somebody who shared a bed with the king, and in this culture, that would have been seen as a tie to his father, to the line of succession. This was Adonijah stirring up trouble. It really was.
Well, you
And
don't know what she might have heard too. If she was just there, they probably considered her as a non-person. There could have been all kind of conversations
Sure.
had in front of her.
Also, that's fair, but also that the Bible does say that she was good looking, that she was an attractive young girl. That's certainly part of the story. But Solomon's fear here, at least according to Dr. Rutland, is that the day after the wedding, Adonijah and his friends would reunite for another dinner party and plan their next plan to have him become the king and to cut, to sort of cut Solomon and his mother out of the story. So he turns. So he basically says to, this is his brother. He says, "I showed you mercy when I should have killed you, and I'm not going to make that mistake twice. I told you it was either loyalty or death, and I feel like you're up to something. So kill him." And he tells the same guy, "Hey, take this guy out." And in fairness, all of these people had multiple chances to obey the king, to obey the Lord. And they continued to sort of test that line and to walk sort of closer and closer to, well, wind up being the edge of the sword, right, for all of them. So we're going to go ahead and finish this chapter so that we can jump through to the epilogue here. On the leadership focus on page 208, it says, "It is not too late to affirm those who need encouragement from you." And he makes it clear here to point out that David failed miserably with his family. He did. There's no objective way to look at it and think that he did not do a great job raising his children. His children were either at complete odds with him, to the point of trying to kill him, or they are barely mentioned in Scripture as though they were not a focal point in the king's life. And so we can call David a man after God's heart. We can call him all those things we listed at the beginning of this chapter: warrior, leader, poet, giant killer, father of the year. Not on that list, right? Excellent parent, engaged parent, not on here anywhere. Here at the end of his life, in his final instructions to his son the king, David finally attempted to handle both Israel and his family. And he begins to give Solomon all this advice, and he says, hey, you need to live for the Lord, and you need to... Some people bristle at him saying you need to act like a man. I think what he's telling him, to me what that means is, hey, this job is not delicate. This job is challenging, and you're not going to have the opportunity to dilly-dally on your decisions sometimes. Even though he's tried to be as deliberate as he can with these people. All these people that Solomon gave second chances to, David had said, yeah, you should have killed those guys because they're going to betray you. David knew it. He absolutely knew it. He was right. They all kind of did something, either disloyal or disobedient or just a little shady. And so he finally takes a minute to give him all this stuff. I think sometimes we get hung up on that language where he says, be a man. And we wanted to get that into, to be a man means to be tough or whatever. I think in this context, it's because Solomon is male. David is saying, hey, you need to be a man. You might get almost read it, hey, it's time for you to grow up. You have to, you're not a prince anymore. You're not sitting at your father's feet listening into what's happening in the kingdom. You are in charge now, and you're going to have to handle it. There's going to be stuff you're going to have to do, and you're going to have to act, and there's no...
Well, he didn't come into the throne like David did.
Yeah.
David had been through, 15 years?
Yeah.
Of
battle
life,
of
taking
just
through so many things before.
sword fights, yeah. David definitely took the throne by force, and Solomon sort of administratively took it, so it is different for sure. Yeah, I mean,
How old was Solomon when he became king?
yeah, it's close to 30.
In his 30s?
It kind of mid-20s, 30s. I think that's right. I have to go look and double check, but yeah, that's pretty close to right. So it says here, all his life, the future builder of the temple probably longed for words of love and support and wisdom from the greatest man he ever knew, but barely knew, his father. And then I think he poses an excellent question for us all to listen to. Who in your life needs to hear and receive your support, your words of wisdom, and your love for them? Who needs to hear from their father, their pastor, their boss, or their mentor? Take courage, be a man, follow God's ways. Who needs your wise instructions on the first steps they should take in their new marriage, in their new job, or what their responsibilities are, right? It's a question worth asking. Who should I be investing in? Who should I be pouring my time into? I do think I highlighted the next line because I thought it was funny. Most likely your advice will not be a list of whom they should kill. Although, well, maybe it will be, I don't know. But the point is, David was concerned with his son achieving the greatest success possible. It is never too soon to start pouring into the lives of those people you lead. Do it now while you are actively leading them. Don't wait until you're on your deathbed, as David did. So, think about those people that look up to you or that should look up to you. Maybe don't because they don't feel like they know you, and don't wait on those opportunities to speak to them.
We've talked a lot about how David did not seem to be engaged parent or didn't seem to be too much involved in his son's lives, but I was thinking, you know, who told them what to do? I mean, they probably in this culture didn't really listen to their mothers. And, you know, they're the son of the king, so I would think that not too many other people were telling them what to do.
Mhm.
So they've just been doing
Yeah, they've been doing a lot of whatever they wanted to. Yeah, that's absolutely right.
everything. Like Hannah.
Yeah, we have some stories where, you know, David would. There's some indications that he might have at times talked to his sons in large groups, or that he might have been sort of educating them. He had a lot of sons. He had a lot of wives and a lot of sons. It's not like there was 2 of them. He was trying to split his time between them. There was, if memory serves me, he's got 30 or so sons that are sort of in the picture here between his wives and his concubines and all these other things. But yeah, it doesn't seem like until now you really have that many moments where somebody said, now David is kind of taking a little bit of a cop out here and says, you do all the stuff that God says, go read the law. That's what you're supposed to be doing. But you know, you do wonder how much of David's story towards the end here, all the drama that he had with Absalom and Adonijah and all these other things, how different it might have been had he been more intentional about his relationship with them, and had he been more intentional about investing in them to determine who they would be, right? So we come around here to the epilogue to wrap up the story here, and we're posed with a question. I think it's an interesting way to pose this question. Imagine a jury sitting through a detailed recap of David's life, his sins, his struggles, his victories, his poems, and then being asked to deliberate until they can unanimously answer the question, was David truly a man after God's own heart? That's a tough job, right? And David is universally regarded as the man after God's own heart, right? And let's read these on page 212, excuse me. On page 212, here's some descriptions of this, some highlights, you might say, of the man after God's own heart. He killed, I knew this had to come back at least one more time. He killed and then posthumously circumcised 200 Philistines for a bride price. He lied to a priest in order to eat holy bread, which led to the massacre of 85 of those priests and their families. He feigned madness in Gath after realizing his mistake in seeking refuge there. He slaughtered countless Amalekites, including women and children, in order to remain a top mercenary commander for the Philistines, who were enemies of Israel. He had the Ark of the Covenant carried into Jerusalem on an ox cart instead of by priests per God's command, which led to the death of a well-intentioned Israelite. He had an affair with Bathsheba, impregnated her, murdered her husband, and tried to cover the whole thing up. He failed to discipline his son Amnon after Tamar's rape. He allowed Absalom to live without punishment even after the prince murdered his brother. And on his deathbed, he instructed Solomon to kill a man because years earlier he had been disrespectful to David. And this is the guy we're calling the man after God's own heart. He says here, how can that be right? Even for a Bronze Age warrior, that's a pretty rough list. There's a story in 2 Samuel. It's really in chapter 24, 25, and we're not going to read it. I'm just going to tell you the story as we go through here. But this is that moment after his last victory over the Philistines. We talked about this, about how he finally put them away. He fought other people down the line, but he's been fighting the Philistines since he was a young boy, and now he's finally, he's defeated them completely. And after that moment, he decides that he wants a census taken of the whole nation. He feels like they're finally at peace for a minute. They're not worried about the next battle that's coming because the Philistines are gone. His armies are strong. His numbers are growing. He wants to know how many people he has. And it says here, the prideful David wanted to revel. The prideful David wanted to revel in this number. And on the bottom of page 213 here, it says, in a surprising display of insight and fear of God, Joab, of all people, asked David not to do this. God had forgiven such a census, had forbidden rather, such a census for Israel. And the general, who was normally loyal to David beyond question and hardly ever squeamish about anything, did not want David and Israel to sin in this way or go through the punishment it would bring on the nation. But despite Joab's warning and the reminder that God had forbidden Israel from numbering itself and basking in self-glory, David insisted on going forward. And Joab reluctantly did what he was told. So at one point in history, God had told the Israelites, don't do any kind of census. Don't be concerned with your numbers or your greatness, because that'll be just what it is. It'll be your numbers and your greatness. And it's not your numbers and your greatness that are your best feature. It is my greatness that is your best feature. I'm going to take care of you. If you do this, you're going to be prideful. You're going to become boastful. You're going to decide you want to conquer things because you feel like you have the strength to do it. You're not going to move forward into my strength, right? And David does it. He does it anyway. And to no one's surprise, God is displeased. And so very similarly to when David had his relationship with Bathsheba and God sends a prophet to go tell him, he does the same thing here. It's just a different guy, a guy named Gad. He was one of David's spiritual advisors. And he makes a point here that I think is good. And this points us to why we can call David to a man after God's own heart. Let me ask it to you this way. Of all the big times that David sinned, the ones that were big enough that they literally wrote them down in the Bible, right? Bathsheba, Uriah, all of those things we just read a minute ago where he made these huge mistakes, all these times where he sinned, where he messed up, where he lied, what is the one thing in common with all those moments?
You pray for forgiveness afterwards.
He repented afterwards. Every time, one thing that it seems that David excelled at was knowing when it was time to stop and repent. He made some mistakes many times. He just sort of, off his own instinct, tried to cover things up on occasion. But David had proven multiple times that he knew when to confess and how to repent. And he says again, hey, God, forgive me for doing this foolish thing. I shouldn't have done this. And so, here's the question. David knew that God had told him not to do this. And then somebody who he trusted reminded him, hey, God told us not to do this. Let's not do this because I don't want anything bad to happen to us. And he did it anyway. And then God is unhappy and David now repents. And so the question is this: was David forgiven? Got one yes, sure. 2 yes. It's not a trick question. Yeah, yes, he absolutely was forgiven. And he says here, our God is gracious and quick to forgive, but God's forgiveness does not always stop the destruction. Sin can be forgiven. Sin also has consequences. What do you think, and don't read ahead if you haven't read it, cheat, but what do you think David's greatest sin was? What do you think he struggled with the most? Lust, yeah, a lot of people think that was his biggest struggle, right? You cheated, yeah, I know you read the book like you're supposed to, but the author says that his biggest, his root, his bedrock level sin that he struggled with the most was pride. He's very proud of who he was and who his position. He's King David. He sort of can't be stopped. Even when he's dealing with, when he has the situation with Bathsheba, well, I'm the king, right? I'm the king. It's good to be the king. So we have a sort of a strange, really the only time in Scripture I can think of something like this happening, where God lets David decide what his punishment is going to be. And it is sort of 3 versions of the nightmare scenario for David. This is right out of 1 Chronicles chapter 21. These are the choices the Lord has given you. You may choose 3 years of famine, 3 months of destruction by the sword of your enemies, or 3 days of severe plague, as an angel of the Lord brings devastation throughout the land of Israel. So, what are the 2 things that have been David's priority all the way through?
God
God in Israel, right? So now he's disobeyed God, and God has told him, no matter what you do, the punishment for it in some way is going to hurt Israel. David at this point has failed in the two things that he has determined are foundational in his life. And he says, I don't ever want to fall into the hands of the enemy. And the famine seems terrible. Even now, even in judgment, I believe in the mercy of God, and so I'll choose the plague from the angel of the Lord. And the way it's written here is, over the next 3 days, a deadly plague devastated Israel. 70,000 people died. No matter what you've done that was bad or wrong, I promise you 70,000 people didn't die because of it. On the third day, God sent a destroying angel with a sword stretched out against Jerusalem. And just as the angel was ready to strike a crushing blow to the capital city, the merciful God whom David trusted cried out to the angel, "Stop. That's enough." And David sort of says, hey, it's not these people's fault that I sin. Take it out on me. Don't take anybody else's life. And God instead begins to give him some instructions. Outside of the area where you're staying now, there's a massive stone. Some huge flat stone in the middle of the desert, and there's a guy who's been using it as his threshing floor. It's where he brings his sheep to shear the wool off of them to sell it. And he says, I want you to go and buy it, build an altar to it, and it'll bring an end to the plague. So David, of course, rushes out to this place. And the Bible sort of alludes that the angel might have been sort of following David at this point. The Bible calls it an angel of death with a sword is following David. And this guy who he's going to go buy the land from, probably upon seeing the angel, says, "You can have it. You don't even have to ask. Take the land." He says, "You can take my oxen for the sacrifice. You can take my wheat that I feed my family with for the grain offering. You can take it. You can take it all. Just this needs to stop." And this is so important. David won't take the gift from this guy. And it's because he says, I can't make a sacrifice to the Lord of something that costs me nothing. If it costs me nothing, it's not a sacrifice. And even in the middle of this very insane moment where people are dying and there's an angel of death walking around and you're trying to physically and spiritually deal with the situation, I think God makes a point here to say it is important for you to do things the right way in the right order. Because he's basically, David tells him, I got to pay the full price. You can't give me the discount because I'm the king. I got to pay full price for this thing so that I can honor the Lord here. And it says, as soon as the purchase was consummated, David built an altar and sacrificed burnt offerings and peace offerings to the Lord. It sort of leads us to believe there, when you talk about the deal being consummated, that they sort of did all the paperwork, right? They could write at this point in history. There was their decrees and documents that were made. There were deeds to land. And so even in the middle of all of this, David says, hey, get the lawyer down here. Let's draw up the papers. Bring the money. We're actually going to buy this thing. We're going to do this deal for real. Sometimes we can get convinced that because we're in dire situations, that we can do things that we think are going to fix it in a way that we think is okay, because we think an emergency disqualifies the need to do things the way that God has told us to do it. And it just never works. This is what Saul would have done, right? Remember some of the stories from King Saul. Oh man, this is bad. The army's coming. Samuel's not here. God told us to wait. I tell you what, we'll split the difference. The army's coming, but Samuel's coming. He's not here. Samuel's supposed to do the sacrifice. I'll do the sacrifice, and then we'll go fight, right? He tried to fix it himself. He tried to do things in a way that was not sort of the proper spiritual procedure. He tried to do things in a way that was not what God had prescribed. He tried to do it his own way. That is the root of Saul's problem. He tried to do it his own way. He tried to fix it. What?
Cut corners.
He tried to cut corners. Even though he was well-intentioned, right? His fear was, these people are going to kill us. Really, when you break it down, it comes down to this, I want to do it my own way. I'm going to cut corners because I think it's necessary, because I'm trying to help people. Well, the only reason to do that is because you really lack the faith that God is going to save you one more time. So David, in the middle of all of this, goes through things the right way. He buys this land. He does the sacrifices as God had prescribed. And the Bible says that as David prayed, that the Lord sent down fire from heaven to just consume this offering, to accept the offering. And he commanded the angel to put away his sword, and Jerusalem was spared. And when David saw that he had shown mercy to Jerusalem and that the plague was over, he offered another sacrifice on the newly built altar. And then he made a proclamation that has impacted history for 3,000 years. This will now be the permanent place of the altar for Israel's burnt offerings. This will be where God's temple will stand. And that great stone represented perhaps David's most grievous sin, which is, he calls it vainglory. It's pride. A sin that caused a hideous plague. The stone also became a place of worship and repentance and restoration. And so the point here is this, is that through it all, and I like some of these lists that just sort of show us the journey we've all been on with David as we walk through this book. Through it all, dodging spears from his father-in-law, hiding in caves, pretending to be loyal to Gath, losing Ziklag, a wife who despised him, sons who tried to dethrone him, lifelong allies who betrayed him, an innocent baby taken from him, famine, rebellions, political conspiracies, plagues. Through it all, David loved and trusted God. He was not perfect, far from it. His sins were real. His repentance was also as real as his faith in the mercy of God. Psalm 13, David writes, I trust in your unfailing love. I will rejoice because you have rescued me. I will sing to the Lord because he has been so good to me. He says, still the question haunts, can you really call him a man after God's own heart? And to really get the answer to that, you got to look back to the very, very, very beginning of David's story. Because even though history has called him a man after God's own heart, and we've called him a man after God's own heart, and the church has called him a man after God's own heart, at the very beginning of his story, when even Samuel said, this can't be the guy. He's scrawny. He's young. He's the one they left out with the sheep. And remember, in this culture, the one you sent out with the sheep was the one that was kind of dumb. Right? Mm-hmm. So done a good job. First Samuel chapter 16 and verse 7, it says, But the Lord said unto Samuel, Look not on his countenance or on his height or his stature, because I have refused the eldest son of Jesse. For the Lord seeth not as man seeth. For man looketh on the outward appearance, but the Lord looketh on the heart. And therein lies the answer to David.
It's not like God didn't know all these things were going to happen.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
God saw something in David's heart that God loved and never gave up on. And I believe God sees that in each one of you as well. That God sees something in you that he created in you that he is not going to give up on, no matter what ways you mess up or what. Sometimes I impress myself with the ways I manage to disappoint the Lord. And yet God's still not going to give up on me or on you either. Great description here. It sounds awkward at first, but it works. This is on page 218. It says, the relationship between David and God was like a long and stormy marriage. They loved, they struggled, they made up, they started over and struggled again, but they never gave up on each other. And he makes a point here. He says, why David and not Saul? Saul sinned wretchedly, but then so did David. He says, Saul's heart, his innermost self, was bent away from God. The sinful ellipse of Saul's life never circled back to God. It just kept on going, looping further and further away until it ended like madness. It ended in madness and witchcraft and suicide. You're looking at it like this. You can think back to some of your math classes you had to take in high school. You're charting something on a graph, and a line starts here, and it goes this way, and then just sort of goes off to infinity, right?
Mm-hmm.
But this is Saul, and this is God, I guess. We'll put evil here up at the top. This is his description of Saul. That Saul walked with the Lord for a long time, but then there was a point where he began to fall away from the Lord, and he just spiraled. And you have, if you were to do David's, I think there would be moments where
It's like step ladders.
he went away, but he returns, and he goes away, and he returns, and he goes away, and he returns. But the overall trajectory of David's life is towards the Lord. He calls it, I like this, I think it's a made-up word, but I like it. I'm going to write it up here. I don't know, I'm trying to write it all right here so that they can see it on the camera. I don't know if they can see it or not, but I think this is a made-up word, but I like it. He calls it Godward momentum. Right? What direction are you going to go? Well, we're just going to go, we're going to go Godward. I don't know if it's forward or backward or side to side, but we're going to go towards God. And then that's just the direction that we're going to pursue. It harkens back to the Israelites when they're wandering in the desert, and God's in front of them in the form of this pillar of fire. It's like, what direction are you going? I promise you, we're going whatever way the fire's going. We're going whatever way the big cloud is going, because that's the way that God is going, and that's the way that I want to go too. It says, we who are so quick to judge each other are also delighted to judge the likes of David. God's favor on David's life disturbs us. It upsets our theological and legalistic apple carts. It tempts us to argue with God and to whine about the divine fascination with this not so holy Jewish king. Look at him. We want to complain. Look at what he did. Look how he sinned. It's right there in the Bible. Look at his life. What did you see in him? And the Lord answers, that's just it. I saw in him. You can see David's sins, and so did I, and he suffered for them. And you see his life from the outside. I saw in him. I saw the heart of my servant David. And I knew that his heart was after my heart. And I never forgot that. Sometimes David forgot, but I never did. That is a beautiful picture of how God sees all of us. And I think that the problem is when we talk about people like this who want to be judgmental of David, we're David in this story, right? And there are other people who will look at you and say, yeah, but why does this person deserve anything good? And there are certainly people in our world who may look at us like that. But for many of you, the person who speaks that way about you is you. Sometimes we speak so negatively of ourselves, we give ourselves no credit. I remember a time where I was trying to decide which ministry job to take. I had two job offers. I had one at a very small church in a small town in our denomination that I got paid next to nothing for. And then I had one in another small town in a church that was not in our denomination that I got paid next to nothing for, but it was closer to home and I knew some family there. I didn't know which way to go. They both seemed like a good thing. They both seemed like something I could do, and I didn't want to make a mistake. And I remember sitting in my pastor's office and saying, I don't know what to do. I'm worried I'm going to screw up here. I'm going to go the wrong way. And his response was, man, you sound really neurotic when you say that. You know, that if your intent is to pursue the Lord, if your intent is to move in a Godward direction, God is not going to punish you for that. He may close a door and send you back in the direction that he knows is maybe in your better interest, if not in your best interest, but that's not the same thing as punishment. sometimes we are our own biggest critic. Sometimes these voices that we want to talk about, people talking about David from the outside, we're talking about ourselves the same way from the inside. We'll finish with this in Psalm 23. It says, surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Psalm 23 and verse 6. Let's pray together. God, I am so grateful that you see my heart more than you see my actions. God, in the same way that David was not perfect, none of us are perfect. God, it is my prayer for myself and for everyone here, for everyone watching, and for everyone in our church, that at the end of their lives, if we had to chart their spiritual direction, that we would be able to say, while there were ups and downs, they moved in a Godward direction all the days of their lives. God, we pray that you would continue to bless this community of faith that we're building. God, I pray that you would even now begin to prepare us as we walk into the summer, into the fall, out of the summertime, to be prepared to reach lost people, to begin to see new faces. God, I pray that you would give us favor in every way. God, we don't want to have a great big church, but we want to see lost people become found people. God, let this season, this fall, be the biggest harvest we've ever seen at Centerville Community Church. God, we ask you to use us in that way. In the name of Jesus we pray. Amen and amen. Now, if you are physically here, it is Ice Cream Wednesday, and so you're able to go outside and get ready. I think they're going to be doing them out front. We're going to have ice cream sundaes on the way out the door tonight. If you're not here and you're watching at home, you're going to have to make your own sundae. I can't help you. But we miss you guys, and we hope that you're feeling better. We hope that we see you Sunday. Here, everybody wave. Wave, wave,
Love
wave,
you.
wave, wave. All right. Feel better. We'll see you guys soon.